Welcome, everyone, to the Self Improvement Podcast, where we discuss self help principles to help you find more joy, passion, and vision for your life as a young adult. I'm Ian.
And I am Dalton Cox.
Today, we're talking about learning by doing. And we all, Dalton and I have stories about how we learned certain things, certain skills.
Straight from experience.
Straight from experience, just doing, straight raw doing. So I can start, I guess. For me, there's a lot that I learned by myself through doing. And some of those things include music production, business, and building computers. Those would be my top self-learned skills, I would say. Oh, actually, another one would be speaking English, because I didn't know how to speak. I knew how to read and maybe write very basic stuff, but when I came here, it's not like, when I came to the US, it's not like I read from a textbook for a year and then suddenly learned how to speak. It was actually me kind of, I don't want to say forced, but I guess being thrown into the system and trying to survive socially at school, and then that became a skill of me putting myself out there over time. So for me, that was the pinnacle of learning by doing, and failing, being awkward for a while. And I feel like I'm still weird, if you could say, in some ways, but I learned to just continue to improve by doing, when it comes to speaking. And I use that same mindset when I'm making content for my business. I used to have a script for what I want to say, but when I get an idea, I just sit down and I turn on the camera and I say whatever comes to mind, and I edit it in a way where it sounds cohesive, and it does, and actually people like it. So that's one area where I learned by doing. But what about you, Dalton?
One thing that I guess you could say I learned the hard way was the importance of the people you surround yourself with. I didn't realize what an impact that made on your life until it really damaged my life. There was a time after I went through a breakup and then had some not so fun things happen to me that I surrounded myself with people I shouldn't have been hanging around with. They were selling drugs, they were stealing money, manipulating, lying, and I decided to spend time with them. And what actually happened because of that is I wound up getting arrested. They had some drugs in their personal belongings, and they were in my car. We had gone and did some boxing, so I guess someone called the cops on us for that. And right when we pulled out, the cop came up, and maybe he smelled the drugs in their bags because we had weed on us, that he asked, "Where's the weed?" And eventually searched my entire car. And because that is my car, it's my property. If something is in your property, it's in your possession. So I got arrested for that. I hung around these guys for a little bit longer after that, in hotels, and I remember hanging around this older gentleman living at his place for a while, and the way he acted impacted the way I acted. He kind of was full of himself, disregarded women, didn't treat them, correctly. He didn't beat them or anything like that, just his ideals for them wasn't the best, and it carried on with me. I started to have a massive ego, thought I was the shit, even though I was in a really bad position. So I experienced that for a while, and then eventually when I realized what kind of path that was putting me down, I left that area. I came back to my hometown and then started hanging around with people that were making me better, such as Ian here. His habits had a way of impacting me and inspiring me, and now my life is pretty great, and that has a lot to do with the people I surround myself with, Ian being one of them, and the people I work with who are kind-natured people who work hard. Yeah. So that's something I learned from experience, and there's some other things, but Ian, is there something else you'd like to talk about?
I'd like to comment, like, you can learn by doing, but also you can learn by surrounding, you can learn from your environment, but also your actions. And in your case, it was like environment, which led to actions.
Yeah.
And then those actions taught you something, which is like an interesting way also to dissect it as well.
For sure.
I would say another thing I learned by doing is business. It's true that I, got educated. I got in programs, learned what to do, how to do it, but it's not like college or high school where you just study like concepts for years and years and years and not really apply it until you have like a diploma or some sort of certificate. In business, though, and this is the reason I love it, is that during like my first week in the first program that was teaching me how to do it, how to do business, I already had things I had to do in the real world, like have conversations with people, extract information, research the market, create content, and communicate more effectively. And that's another great example of just doing. And that applies to sales too. I couldn't sell for months. Was it 5 months? And that was like a normal part of the process. But the reason I learned and that I am able to close deals that are in the thousands of dollars is because I failed so many times. I got so many no's. I got so many rejections, objections. Oh, it's too expensive. Oh, I don't have the right time. I'm not sure if this is gonna work for me. But these things just made me improve slowly until I started getting a really great response from people. I started getting clients. And that was all the result of doing. The program I signed up for had all the information in the world about selling. But it didn't work right away because it's not like a magic pill. Doing is what made me better at sales, not the theory. And so I'm even actually taking another course this week about speaking on camera and how to have more charisma on camera, how to, look at the lens and how to have certain body motions and all that, which is super interesting. It's really going to help my content. But as I was doing that, they had a lot of exercises in there, and I was already 2 modules in, and I didn't do any of the exercises, so I decided to stop because I know that it's not going to work unless I actually implement what the course was teaching me. I feel like that is also true for diet, right? Like, you read about different ways to put on muscle or lose weight. You read about so many different methods that you don't know which one to do, and so you end up not doing anything. And then some people like blame their lack of results on all these different methods and that how they all don't work. But the reality is that the challenge isn't finding how, it's committing to the what you need to do.
Yeah. has a little bit to do with what we've talked about previously on extreme ownership. Taking ownership of what happens in your life. It's not the program's fault or method's fault that you didn't get the results you wanted, because if you don't ever try it, you won't see the results. So blaming it on there being so many different ways to gain muscle, or this is the best way, and saying that because there's so many ways, you're not able to achieve muscle gain is just ridiculous.
Mm-hmm.
The way that you would achieve muscle gain or a healthier diet is by implementing it to your life and then seeing the results yourself.
Exactly. And last week and this week, this is a different topic too. We were talking about dating, and just how to talk to the opposite sex and how to be cool or whatever, and how to be yourself. And there were a lot of great lessons from that. But we always came back to the conclusion that none of this matters if you're not putting yourself out there, if you're not risking getting rejected.
Yeah, I've had a little bit of experience with dating, and actually I'll get into that a little bit later. What I would like to say instead is, facing that rejection, it's okay to get rejected. What's important is that you're being yourself, you're being honest with your intentions. Obviously you want to have good intentions, and that you're being vulnerable enough to approach that girl that you're interested in, or that guy that you're interested in. Doing that can earn you some respect, really. And the thing is if you go up to that girl or that guy and you say, "Hey, I like you, would you like to go grab a drink?" or "Hey, I think you're pretty cute, I'd like to get to know you, you want to go on a date?" or whatever you're going to say, if it's honest, and then they say no, that's actually a good thing, because there's this process called polarizing. You polarize someone either to the point where they don't like you or that they do like you. And usually people are in a neutral position. And what that does is when you polarize somebody who doesn't like you, you're like, okay, well, I don't have to waste my time with this person anymore, or my feelings, and I can move on to another person, because there's over 1 billion people on this planet, and if they say yes and you get acceptance and you polarize them in a good way, well, then you just scored yourself a date. And now I'm going to get into a little bit more of like my experience. I've realized that it's more than just sex. When I first started dating, to me it was like, I want sex, I want to get laid. I was a little horny teenager. And it actually hurt me being like that. One instance is I had this girlfriend who didn't have habits that accommodated mine. She wasn't motivated, she didn't have goals, she smoked, didn't take ownership or have good time management, compared to me, who did have those things. Not saying I was better than her, just she wasn't a good match for me. And I learned from that, from being lustful, that we weren't a good match, and ended up having it was an okay relationship for a while, but it ended up distracting me from my overall goals, changed some of my habits, and had an overall negative impact. I've also seen that when I didn't have a girlfriend and I was looking for a girlfriend and my intentions were just to have sex. And that kind of shows, if you don't really care about the person and you just want to treat them like an object, they're not gonna really follow suit. Why would somebody want a relationship with someone that doesn't care about them? I realized that with one girl that I actually wish I'd treated her better. Like I said before, it was all about sex. And she was motivated. And she was charismatic. And I think a good partner for me. And because all I wanted was sex, I blew that. And I've reached out to her recently. And she doesn't want anything to do with me. And I can understand that. Now, my intentions are different. You know, dating is... You don't need to be in a relationship. You shouldn't have to be in a relationship to be happy. If that's the case, then you need to work on yourself. You should have other things that make you happy. Relying on somebody else isn't going to be beneficial. And girls aren't going to want a guy who doesn't have any goals or aspirations or achievements in their life. And I've realized that, you know, I have this goal of joining the Air Force, and so every day I'm trying to get better. That's why we have this podcast. You know, I'm constantly working out, working on my fitness, trying to establish good relationships, trying to be a good leader. And people see this. I'm not doing it because I want a girlfriend. I'm doing it because I want to be better. I want to achieve things. And now I have 4 or 5 girls that are interested in me. And I'm not even pursuing them because, well, one, I'm more passionate about what my future is going to hold and I'm not going to be here for much longer. And 2, I don't see them being good matches for me. Like, there's one woman who, if I would be with, and I think it would just take up my time and take up my money. Like, one of my goals is to be financially fit and save money. And when you're in a relationship, unless you have one where you've declared that that's not really what you're trying to do, you're going to spend money. It's going to be costly. It's going to be costly with time, and it's going to be costly financially.
And you learn that just by pursuing the wrong things for a while and then learning.
Yeah, learning from my mistakes.
Yeah.
And that's really important, really. You can look at your mistakes like, oh man, I regret this. And you shouldn't regret anything in life. Yeah, you're gonna do things that you're not so proud of. And as long as you can say, hey, now I know what road this takes me on and what you should do instead, as long as you learn from it, it's okay. As long as you're not making the same mistake over and over again. Because that's when you don't learn from your mistakes. That's when you're crazy.
That's when you're crazy. Well, yeah. That's why I do a weekly reflection. I have like a little template I use. It has a bunch of prompts. If you guys are interested, you can DM us on Instagram. I'd love to send you a template. I use it personally every week so that I can learn from my actions better, more objectively. I can just write things down and let myself soak everything in. And I also teach that to my clients. I always teach them to get in the habit of reviewing, because that's what the coaches that I hired do and what they taught me, and they're super successful. Like, these guys have 6-figure, 8-figure, 9-figure businesses, and they're able to manage a lot of stuff in their life. So I am more than confident that this is something you can do that's going to help you. It helps me personally, and yeah. Hey, one more thing. Yeah, little caveat is, actually I want to mention 2 things. First of all, this is why we kind of like have guests, is because we give them a chance to reflect and like learn deeper stuff about their actions, because they can sit down and like have the time to think about it.
We also learn from their stories.
Exactly. So it's a win-win situation. And if you haven't checked out any of the guest episodes, please do so. It's really good. Like some of them are, like the one we did with Miss
Rokes?
Miss Rokes, wedding planner. Super good stuff regarding school, staying motivated, having like communication. Right, that was one of the things. And it's what makes this podcast really fun. Is that every other week we try to have a guest.
It's funny that you bring Mrs. Rokes up because I've had multiple conversations about sacrifice because of what she was talking about with weddings and being married. You know, some people don't like the word sacrifice. Like, it's just a word, okay? And what it is you being able to do something for your significant other that you may not enjoy doing, but you're doing it for them. That's what I would say sacrifice is. And I've had conversations with people, you know, preaching the same thing, people who are having trouble in their relationships. And I remember I asked this one woman, she was having trouble with her boyfriend, and I asked, well, if you were willing to sacrifice some stuff to spend time with him and do stuff that he likes, do you think he'd reciprocate that? And she was like, yeah. So,
Yeah. Dalton here, he solving big relationship problems, guys. No, I think Dalton is really good at learning from his like experiences because he's dated, he's done stuff. You know, there's a lot more to learn always, but I feel like he brings a lot of wisdom. Relatively, yeah.
I would say for my age, I may have some wisdom, but I mean, there are people who experience more than me.
I feel like everyone has something unique to bring.
Absolutely.
On different areas of life.
And that's what's so great about our guests is they're all different with
Very, yeah.
Yeah, and that's what surprised me. It's like, wow, it's like, oh, these guys are gonna talk about the same thing, but no, they have different ideas, different morals, different lessons.
For sure.
One thing I would like to talk about that I learned from experience in a positive manner was public speaking, delivering speeches to large groups of people.
Right.
I remember I went to a muster. I paid for to attend a seminar. And I met with somebody that was also attending the seminar who has done a lot of public speaking, and he gave me some advice. And also just listening to Jocko, who I was seeing how he spoke and how he was delivering his speeches. I learned from that, and I applied that to a couple of speeches I've had recently.
Did it work right away?
Oh, it worked right away. Like, it was my first big speech. I was invited to speak at the high school baccalaureate. And I practiced it like a billion times on camera to, you know, get my punctuation right. I recited it on my runs like 3 times per run. I had like a goal of doing it 5 times per day. And that really helped. And then I went and rehearsed it at a church. And they said it was really good. And then I delivered it to the baccalaureate. They said I did really well. And so I learned that those methods work. You know, being punctual, looking at the audience, remembering your speech, if not verbatim, looking back at keywords, recording yourself so you can see how you're performing. Which is funny because when I was recording myself, I realized I was taking very long pauses. Which I've also learned that speeches are better when they're shorter. So having a 20-minute speech isn't going to be as impactful as having a 5-minute speech. And being able to reduce it down to 5 minutes and having the most important details and points in there is going to have a greater impact as well.
So interesting. And you refined what you were going to say every time you rehearsed it.
Yes.
So it was like, it's not like the first attempt was great. It was just doing and then seeing how it went, using that as a feedback loop. It's really good, man. Yeah, it's public speaking is one of those like very practical stuff. And it's just like the course is teaching me. Like, you got to record yourself, look at the footage. You can mute the audio to kind of like analyze your gestures, your face movements, your eye contact. And it's so action based. It's not something that you can buy off a shelf. You have to put in the work, which is great because it polarizes those that don't want to do it.
Yeah, and it's scary. Like when I first went up and I talked to that church group of people, I was scared. I was literally shaking while I was giving the speech. When I was giving it at the baccalaureate, I was scared. I was shaking in my seat before I gave the speech. And a little at the beginning, you could tell there was a little bit of fear in my voice. And by doing it over and over again, I'm more comfortable with it. Like I gave a speech at one of my old friends died, and I gave a speech at his memorial, and that was pretty good. I wasn't afraid at all at that time. And his grandparents thanked me and said I gave a wonderful speech as well, which I'm glad. And that's who the speech was really for, was for his family.
Very noble of you.
Another thing I've learned, and it's interesting, is because of my arrest, I had to do like a drug education program, and I learned the power of and. Not using but in your statements. Because when you use but, like let's say, hey, your idea is great, but
yeah,
this is the better way to go with it, or this could be a better way to go with it, it's like I'm disregarding your idea. When you say and instead, it's like, yeah, I see what you're saying, and we can improve it with this.
that's interesting. Why was that part of the program? I'm just curious.
It was just something that I guess you could say teacher mentioned. It was funny because I was talking about explaining things with tact, something I learned in Jocko's leadership book. When you're telling your boss that there's a better way to do something, he gives you a bad way of doing something, you don't go, what? That idea is terrible. We should do this instead. No, what you should do is like, okay, boss, I see where you're coming from. It's a great idea. I feel like we can implement this really well. I'm going to try my best. But, this could be better here, here, here. And I forget exactly what I said, but I said that, and I said that at the meeting. And the instructor, the teacher, was like, okay, that's great. Try using and instead. And then he explained why.
Yeah, that's great, because communication, I guess, was part of the program, which is awesome. That's great. Yeah, man. And like sales, I was gonna say something about sales. I'm forgetting everything today, dude, because I struggled with sleep last week. But by struggling, it's kind of like doing. Because you make a choice when you not follow through on certain things, and it teaches you something. So like even if you fail at something, that's still action. It's still doing, and you can learn from it.
Yeah, failure is the greatest teacher.
For sure. Alright, so I think we covered a lot of good stuff here. Any final ideas, thoughts?
We're all humans, and we're all gonna make mistakes, and it's a learning process. It's okay to make those mistakes as long as you're willing to try to correct them in the future. So don't beat yourself too bad about anything, and you'll be okay. We're all experiencing this in our own ways, and we all have something to bring to the table.
It's perfect, yeah, because I also want to say this, which is that you can't learn from doing if you're beating yourself up over it. That's why we talk about gratitude in many episodes. If you beat yourself up, you kind of like shame yourself for or for not being like good enough, or whatever stories you tell yourself. And you can't learn from that place. Acknowledging the problem versus dwelling on it are two different things. And I'm working on that myself. So I just wanted to throw that reminder in there.
Yeah. Well, that's about it for the podcast, guys. Thank you for joining us. I hope you learned something of value today that you can implement in your life to get better. And with that, we'll see you guys next week.